So this happened a little over 2 years ago now, and I wanted to share it somewhere, just to look back on it one day and never forget the lesson I learned. It was 2016, and I had just started a new job at a motel. It was low pay, but I needed an office job. One of my friends, Michael, got me this job. For a few days, I did training with the owner in the mornings. For 2 nights, Michael trained me. Our job was the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing exciting. Checking guests in and doing paperwork. My boss, or the owner, went away with his wife on vacation for a week, which is attributed to the swift training I had to endure. So it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with security cameras around the motel's property and glass windows all around the office building with a glass door. There was no night window like most motels have. It was fairly early in the night, about 1 a.m. I was just doing my normal check-in paperwork. That's when a man walks in and asks if we have any rooms available. Usually, if someone's sketchy, my boss has me lie and say no, but he seemed normal at the moment. Without hesitation, I said, "Yes, of course, just for one." And he replies, "Yes." So I begin creating the reservation on the computer when I notice he starts swatting the air and making spitting noises, as if he's being surrounded by flies. I try to ignore it. As far as I'm concerned, it wasn't my business, so I try to check him into the room as quickly as possible. I give him his key, and he's on his way. At this point in time, I could be described as very timid. I had a lot going on in my personal life, so I hope you can all understand my reaction to what happens next. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door, causing me to jump. Absolutely frightened, I look up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door, puts his head through, and says, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" And my only defense is trying to be helpful, so I replied, "Maybe there's something wrong with your key. Let me give you another one." The look he had in his eyes was inexplainable. I felt like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key, and he went back to his room. I tried texting Michael because he's the one who trained me, though it was the middle of the night, and he was asleep. I needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back. I go into absolute panic mode. I run into the back office, lock the door, and pull out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when working at night. I hear the man in the office yelling, hello, why won't you let me into my room? Do you not like me?" Me, being an absolute idiot, not standing my ground and just calling the police when I'm feeling scared, decided to take the situation on alone. I reply, "I'm just on the phone. I'll be right out." I start calling Michael over and over for help. No answer. I decided to take a few breaths and then step out of the office. The man was not there. He was in the bathroom. I start hearing him talking to himself, angrily saying, "Kill her, kill her." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police. He comes out and I say, "Oh, you're fine. Let me show you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long-sleeved sweater, so with my arms down, I was able to hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I walk outside and he seemed insistent on walking behind me. We begin making our way to the staircase and up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, continuously looking behind me to make sure he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room, and I stop at his room a few doors down. I smile and say, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This is your room," as it clearly said on the door. This whole time he was going to someone else's room and trying to open the door. After letting him into his room, I ran back to the office, locked the door, and found out there was a lone woman staying in the other room he was trying to get into. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns over. I felt bad for confiding in him about the guy, but he seemed willing to keep an eye and ear out. The next night, the man came back, but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I told my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take it very seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for the next year, where many other strange encounters happened. But this was one of the worst. I used to work the night shift at a gas station on the side of some highway in the country. From the hours of 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., the road was pretty dead. I would have maybe 1 or 2 people come in to pick up hash in a whole night. It was a very boring and depressing job, especially doing the graveyard shift, but I had just finished college and I needed to pay off my loans. The only reason I kept this job was because my boss threw me an extra $5 an hour for doing the night shift. On this one cold December night, I was doing my usual thing, reading the newspaper, playing games on my phone, and whatnot, when I noticed the headlights of a car pulling off the highway into the parking lot. It was a red pickup truck. Somebody stepped out and shut the door. I went back to reading the paper as I saw that he was standing by the gas pump. I assumed he wasn't paying cash. I looked up a few moments later and saw that he was still standing in the same position, staring at the gas pump. I almost felt obligated to go out and help him. He was obviously confused. I felt a cold chill run up my spine as I saw the 6-foot-something tall man slowly turn his head to face me. I couldn't make out any features of his face, but I knew he was staring at me. I tried to pretend I didn't notice by going back to reading the paper. Of course, I wasn't really reading now. I was a bit shaken by the guy out there. I just wanted him to pay debit or credit and leave. I looked up and gasped as the man was now much closer to the front door of the building. It wouldn't have been so disturbing if it weren't for the fact that he wasn't moving. He was just standing still as before, still looking in my direction. I walked over to the door to get a closer look. All I could see in his face was still blackness. I locked the door and flipped the open sign to closed. I didn't care if this would possibly get me in trouble. I was not taking a chance because, quite frankly, I was scared shitless. I walked back behind the counter and sat down on one of the containers on the floor just so I couldn't see the man outside anymore. I stayed in that position for a good 5 minutes, texting every friend I had to see who was awake. I was desperate to tell somebody about this. When I finally got up to check that he was gone, I let out a full scream, as the man was now right outside the door. I picked up the phone on the counter and called the police. The operator was reluctant to send somebody over because of the way I described the situation, but I persuaded them. I hid behind the counter, balled up like a child. I began to hear heavy thumps at the door, not innocent knocks to catch my attention. I mean thuds and thumps trying to break down the door. And then eventually it finally stopped. I heard the sound of a car starting outside and then driving off. I looked outside and he was gone. A patrol cop, along with a state trooper, pulled into the parking lot. I reported the red pickup truck and told them which direction I thought he went in. I couldn't describe his face, as all I saw was blackness. Of course, there wasn't much the police could do, as the man didn't really do anything. I left that job a few months later for a job in the city. It was 2 years ago. I was called in to do the night shift, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. at 7-Eleven, since somebody called out. The store was located on a busy road in a rather quiet, rural area. During the night shift, you could expect anywhere from 10 to 20 people to come in to buy a beer or something else. This one particular night, there was this one guy, mid-20s, that came in. He started making weird noises, loud, yelling noises. I assumed he had some kind of mental disability. In fact, my brother has a mental disability, so I immediately felt sympathy for the guy. He walked up to the counter without any items, with his head facing me, but his eyes were looking up at the ceiling. I felt uncomfortable. I honestly didn't know how to deal with it. I tried speaking with him, but he only responded in loud noises. I kept checking if he was with someone outside, but he was alone. There weren't any cars in the parking lot, so I assumed he walked. He stood there for so long, looking up at the ceiling and making noises, that I tried to get him out by handing him a bag of chips and telling him he could go. I tried finding some kind of number to call for someone to help him. Then, out of nowhere, he finally turned around and walked out of the store. I felt so horrible for the man, but at the same time, I felt a bit creeped out. About an hour later, the phone on the counter rang. I picked up to hear the familiar yelling sounds of the man from earlier. It caught me off guard. I didn't know what to think. Other than that, this had to be some kind of prank. I hung up on him and was now becoming paranoid of my surroundings, constantly checking the outside through the windows. Come 4 o'clock, the person working after me came in, finally allowing me to go home. It wasn't my problem anymore. I got home and threw all my stuff on the table, ready to get to sleep. But my phone rang within a minute after entering the door. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would someone be calling at 4 a.m.? I could only imagine it was bad news. I braced myself and picked up the phone to hear the man again. I felt sick to my stomach as I listened to the loud noises he made. I struggled to slam the phone back down. All night, I felt like I was being watched, even with all the blinds shut, and I could swear I heard strange noises coming from all over my house. I refused to get any sleep until the sun came up. Weeks passed, and I had forgotten about the incident. Until one day, when going into the basement for the first time in a while, I found that papers had been scattered all over the floor. When I went into the basement closet, I found writing on the walls. 7-Eleven had been written in Sharpie on the wall, along with the address of the 7-Eleven I worked at, and my house address. The most disturbing part, I also found various kitchen knives, along with a large pocket knife, sitting in the closet. What started out as seemingly just an innocent person turning into something of a prank ultimately turned into something much more horrifying. He had been living down there for God knows how long, and I'm just grateful that, for whatever reason, he changed his mind and left, because I haven't seen or heard from him since. All I can say is, that man is dangerously ill. I've worked in the K-9 unit for 9 years, and I have worked my fair share of graveyard shifts. I've definitely come across weird things at night, but I'll never forget this one night. I worked with my dog Sammy, a German Shepherd. She was 2 years old at the time, and was still kind of new to the job, just like me. I was driving down a road surrounded by crops when I spotted a suspicious-looking white van parked within the crops. Both doors were open. I flashed my lights, trying to draw out whoever was there. Nobody came out, so I parked and quickly scanned the area. No one was in sight, so I took Sammy with me to track down the driver of the van. Sammy started going crazy when we reached the trunk. She was pulling so hard she nearly broke off the leash. I opened the trunk, and a blast of foul air hit me in the face. I almost passed out from the horrible smell and the pure shock of what I saw inside. There were 7 full body bags, each with a pair of feet sticking out at the bottom. I immediately requested backup over my radio. Just then, I heard the snap of a twig nearby, and Sammy lost it. I lost grip of the leash, and she took off into the crops. I drew my gun and followed the sound of her barking. As each crop hit me in the face, I felt as if something might reach out and grab me. I stopped when Sammy's barking ceased. But as I stopped, the sounds of movement didn't. I realized I was surrounded. I had never experienced such fear in my life. I stood there, holding my breath as the movement around me stopped. Then, out of nowhere, I felt 2 arms wrap around my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't fight. I thought I was going to die. And then, I heard Sammy's bark, followed by the scream of the man choking me as Sammy bit down on his leg. What I did next is something I still question to this day. I turned around and pulled the trigger, killing the man. I grabbed Sammy by the leash, and we ran all the way back to the car. I could feel people following us from behind. Somehow we made it to the car safely, and I drove a 1/4 mile down the road. I didn't stop to see which way they went. I didn't hold my ground. I fled like a coward. I cared much more about our lives than I did about the job. And I'll still say that today. But it still pains me, knowing how much of a coward I was. Backup arrived shortly, but the van was gone. I even failed to get the plate number on dashcam video, or even just write it down. This was within my first few months on the force, but it haunted me for months. I, someone who was sworn to protect, had let a van full of killers get away. I was working the night shift at my local Woolbounds back when it used to be open 24 hours a day. There would normally be less than 10 customers throughout my shift, but I wouldn't get to sit around and do nothing though. They wanted me to work on stock when I wasn't helping a customer. It was a bigger Woolbounds, so oftentimes there might have been one other person in the building, whether it be someone working on stock or someone cleaning. This night, I was the only one working. I was stocking in the cereal aisle when I heard something fall over on the other side of the shelf, in the next aisle over. I would always hear the door to the store sliding open. It was the loudest thing ever, so it kind of caught me off guard that there might have been a customer in the building. Of course, it wasn't weird. Yet. Not until I looked to my left and saw a man standing by the edge of the aisle, shooting me a blank stare. "Do you need something, sir?" I asked him. No. "Could you just point me to the eggs?" he said. He wasn't normal looking. His face looked weird, not exactly ugly, just unusual. Like his upper lip kind of came out too far, almost like a Simpsons character. I was a bit uncomfortable that I had to deal with ringing him up. I hurried to finish the cereal aisle, and when I was done, I began to bring the U-boat cart to the back room. I was stopped halfway when the same guy cut me off through the middle section of the aisle. I want to note this guy was probably in his mid-30s, and at the time I was only 22, though I looked much younger. The guy stopped me and started trying to make awkward small talk. He started by asking me my name, how old I was, if and where I went to school, and why I was doing the night shift. His questions started to get weirder when he asked me if I went to parties a lot and if I had a girlfriend. I told him I didn't, and then he asked me if I'd ever had a boyfriend while putting his hand on my shoulder. I immediately started walking away with the cart, but he followed me. I told him I wasn't into whatever he was thinking about. I went faster and faster until I finally made it to the back storage room. He didn't follow me in. I wasn't supposed to stay back there for extended periods of time to avoid customer theft, but I decided it would be best to just wait for him by the register so that he would ring his stuff up and leave. But I waited there for at least 20 minutes. He never came. I decided he was gone, and whether he stole the eggs and something else, there wasn't anything I could do now. I had to go to the bathroom, so I took a quick jog to the back of the store and into the employee bathroom. Moments after sitting on the toilet, my heart dropped into my stomach as I heard the bathroom door open. I choked the urge to say something like, "You can't be in here." But I didn't want to give away my position. I lifted my leg so that I wouldn't be visible from under the stall. And what happened next was simply horrifying. I sat there for the longest time, looking at the floor, not moving a muscle. When I finally looked up, I could see an eye peering through the crack of the stall door. I screamed. I knew I was trapped. I knew I had one shot at making a move. I grabbed the box cutter in my pocket and began sliding it through the crack of the door, forcing him to move his eye away. I took that chance to slam the stall door open in his face and hightail it out of the bathroom and all the way out of the store. I called my boss at least 5 times before he finally picked up, and I explained everything. He told me to call the cops, and so I did. Of course, the man wasn't in the store anymore by the time the cops showed up. I only did the night shift twice after that, and luckily, didn't see the man again.